On stage, applause, adoration, stardom. Off stage, rejection, humiliation, racism. This was Sammy Davis Jr.'s reality in 1959 Las Vegas. He could make white audiences scream his name. He just couldn't sleep in the same hotel as them. Until the night Frank Sinatra decided enough was enough. Las Vegas, November 1959. The Sands Hotel and Casino was the crown jewel of the Strip. The most prestigious venue in the city. The place where careers were made and legends were born. And on this particular November night, the Sands was hosting the hottest show in America. The Rat Pack. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop. 5 entertainers who turned a standard Vegas variety show into a cultural phenomenon. People flew in from across the country just to see them. The shows sold out weeks in advance. Tickets went for premium prices. And the Sands Hotel was making money hand over fist. The Rat Pack show wasn't just a performance. It was an event. Frank would sing his classics. Dean would croon and play the lovable drunk. Sammy would sing, dance, do impressions, play multiple instruments, and basically prove he was the most talented person on any stage anywhere. They'd joke with each other, improvise, bring drinks on stage, make the whole thing feel like you were watching 5 friends having the best night of their lives. It was loose, it was fun, it was dangerous in the best way. You never knew what they'd say or do next. And audiences couldn't get enough, but behind the glamour and the laughter and the sold-out shows, Las Vegas in 1959 was deeply, systematically racist. The city had a clear color line. Black entertainers could perform on the Strip, but they couldn't stay in the hotels where they worked. They couldn't gamble in the casinos. They couldn't eat in the restaurants. They couldn't swim in the pools. After their shows ended, they had to leave through the back exits and find accommodations in the West Side, the segregated black neighborhood on the other side of town. This wasn't written policy. It was just understood. The way things were done. The way things had always been done. Sammy Davis Jr. had been dealing with this his entire career. He'd grown up in vaudeville, performing since he was 3 years old. He'd seen every kind of racism America had to offer. He'd performed for segregated audiences in the South, black people forced to sit in balconies while white people got the good seats. He'd stayed in black-only hotels in cities where his talent made white audiences rich. He'd used separate bathrooms, drunk from separate water fountains, been called every slur imaginable. By 1959, at 34 years old, Sammy was used to it. Not comfortable with it. Not accepting of it. But used to it. He'd learned to navigate the system, to survive, to keep working despite the humiliation. But the Rat Pack shows at the Sands were different. Because Sammy wasn't just a performer there. He was an equal part of the act. Frank Sinatra treated him as a brother, as a star, as someone worthy of respect. On stage, there was no color line. Sammy stood center stage next to Frank and Dean. They shared microphones. They put their arms around each other. They made it clear to the audience that these 5 men were friends, partners, equals. For 2 hours every night, the Sands Hotel stage was the most integrated place in Las Vegas, and then the show would end. Frank and Dean would go to their suites in the hotel. Sammy would pack up his things and leave through the back door. November 14, 1959. The Rat Pack had just finished their second show of the night. It had been electric. Sammy had done a 20-minute segment where he did impressions of everyone from Nat King Cole to Jerry Lewis, and the audience had nearly rioted with applause. Frank had sung, "I've Got You Under My Skin," and reduced grown men to tears. Dean had made everyone laugh so hard they couldn't breathe. It was the kind of show that would be talked about for years. Sammy came off stage sweating, exhausted, exhilarated. He went to his dressing room, took off his stage clothes, wiped off his makeup, changed into a suit. He packed his things like he always did. He'd done this routine hundreds of times. Perform, change, pack, leave. Find a cab to take him to a black-owned boarding house on the west side. Sleep. Come back the next day to do it all over again. It was humiliating. It was exhausting. But it was the deal. The price of working in Vegas as a black man. He walked down the hallway backstage, carrying his small suitcase. The hallway was bustling with activity. Stagehands cleaning up. Musicians packing their instruments. Other performers from earlier acts heading out. Some of them were going to their rooms upstairs. Sammy was going to the parking lot. He pushed through the back exit door into the warm Nevada night. The parking lot was mostly empty now. A few cars. Distant sounds of the strip, music and voices carrying on the wind. Sammy stood there for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness, looking for a taxi. That's when he heard the voice behind him. "Sammy, where the hell are you going?" Sammy turned. Frank Sinatra was standing in the doorway, still in his stage clothes, a drink in his hand, looking confused. "Getting a cab, Frank," Sammy said, trying to keep his voice light. "Long day. Need some sleep." Frank walked out into the parking lot, looking around like he was searching for something. "A cab? Your room's upstairs." "What are you talking about?" Sammy felt his stomach tighten. He'd been careful to never make this Frank's problem. Never put Frank in a position where he had to confront the hotel's racism. Because what could Frank do? Even Frank Sinatra couldn't change how the whole city worked. "It's fine, Frank. I've got a place I stay. It's not a big deal." Frank's expression changed. Understanding dawning on his face. Then anger. The kind of anger Sammy had seen before when Frank felt betrayed or disrespected. But this anger wasn't directed at Sammy. "Are you telling me," Frank said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet, "that you don't have a room in this hotel?" Sammy hesitated. "Frank, it's just how it works here. It's fine. I'm used to it." "Used to it?" Frank's voice rose. "You just performed for 2 hours. You made this hotel a fortune tonight. And they won't give you a goddamn room? Frank, please. It's not worth the trouble. Not worth the trouble." Frank was shouting now. "You're part of this show. You're part of the Rat Pack. And they're making you sleep somewhere else because of the color of your skin?" Other people were coming out now. Dean Martin, hearing the commotion. Hotel staff. Security. Frank turned to one of the security guards. "Get me the manager. Right now. Mr. Sinatra, it's after midnight. Mr. Roberts has gone home. Then get him out of bed and get him down here. Now. Or I walk out of this hotel and I never come back." The security guard's face went pale. Frank Sinatra threatening to quit the Sands was not an idle threat. Frank was the Sands. His shows were the reason people came to this hotel instead of the Flamingo or the Desert Inn. If Frank left, he'd take the Rat Pack with him. And the Sands would lose millions. Within 20 minutes, Jack Roberts, the hotel manager, arrived in the parking lot, hastily dressed, looking nervous and angry in equal measure. "Frank, what's this about?" "It's the middle of the night." Frank pointed at Sammy. "This man, my friend, my colleague, the star of the show that's making you rich, doesn't have a room in this hotel. Explain that to me." Roberts shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Sinatra, you know how things work in Vegas. It's not personal. It's just policy. We have to be sensitive to our guests. Some of them might not be comfortable with integrated accommodations." Frank's face went red. "Sensitive to your guests? What about being sensitive to Sammy? What about the fact that he's a human being who deserves basic dignity? I understand your frustration, but this is how every hotel on the Strip operates. It's not just us." "I don't give a damn what every other hotel does," Frank said. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give Sammy a room. Tonight. The best room in the hotel. And from now on, Sammy stays where I stay. Same floor. Same building. Same everything. Or you can explain to the Sands owners why I cancelled the rest of our shows and took the Rat Pack to the Flamingo. Roberts looked like he'd been punched. Frank, be reasonable. I can't just change hotel policy on my own authority. This comes from ownership. This comes from the city. This is bigger than me. Then make it smaller than you, Frank said. Because I'm not performing in a hotel that treats my friends like second-class citizens. You've got until tomorrow night to figure it out. Either Sammy gets a room, or you get new entertainment. Frank turned and walked back into the hotel. Dean Martin, who'd been watching the whole thing, put his hand on Sammy's shoulder. Come on, Smoke, Dean said, using his nickname for Sammy. You're staying in my suite tonight. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow. That night, Sammy slept in Dean Martin's suite at the Sands Hotel. Technically as Dean's guest, which skirted the hotel's segregation policy just enough to avoid a crisis. But it was a temporary solution to a permanent problem. The next morning, Frank was on the phone with the Sands ownership. The conversation was brief and to the point. Either the hotel changed its policy on black guests, or Frank Sinatra was done. Not just with the Sands. He'd take his entire operation elsewhere and he'd make sure every newspaper and television station in America knew why. The Sands Hotel faced a choice. Keep their segregation policy and lose the biggest draw in Las Vegas, or integrate and risk backlash from racist guests. They chose integration. On November 15, 1959, the Sands Hotel announced a new policy. All guests, regardless of race, would be welcome to stay in the hotel, eat in the restaurants, gamble in the casino, and use all facilities. It was presented as a progressive move, the hotel getting ahead of inevitable social change. But everyone knew the real reason. Frank Sinatra had demanded it. And when Frank Sinatra demanded something in Las Vegas, it happened. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Other hotels on the Strip, not wanting to be seen as behind the times, quickly followed suit. Within weeks, the color barrier in Las Vegas accommodations began to crumble. It didn't happen all at once. There was resistance, subtle discrimination, ways of making black guests feel unwelcome even if they were technically allowed. But the official policy changed. And over time, the culture changed too. Sammy Davis Jr. never had to sleep in the West Side again. He had a permanent suite at the Sands whenever the Rat Pack performed. He could eat where he wanted. Gamble where he wanted. Swim in the pool. Walk through the front door instead of the back. These basic dignities, things that white performers took for granted, were now his too. But the significance went beyond Sammy. Other black entertainers started demanding the same treatment. Lena Horne. Harry Belafonte. Nat King Cole. They'd all dealt with Vegas segregation for years. Now they had leverage. If the Sands could integrate for Sammy Davis Jr., every hotel could integrate for every black performer. The dam had broken. Years later, in a 1989 interview, Sammy was asked about that night. About how it felt to have Frank Sinatra go to war with a hotel on his behalf. Sammy's eyes filled with tears. Frank didn't just get me a hotel room, Sammy said. He gave me my dignity back. He told the whole world that I mattered. That I was worthy of respect. Not because I could sing or dance or entertain. But because I was his friend. Because I was human. Do you know what that meant to me? Do you know what that meant to every black performer who came after me? The interviewer asked if Sammy thought Frank had done it for political reasons, to make a statement about civil rights. Sammy shook his head. Frank didn't think about it in those terms. He wasn't trying to be a civil rights hero. He was just being a friend. He saw his friend being disrespected and he couldn't tolerate it. That's who Frank was. If you were his friend, he'd go to war for you. Didn't matter what it cost him. But it did cost Frank something. There was backlash. Letters from racist customers threatening to boycott the Sands. Anonymous threats. Angry editorials in conservative newspapers accusing Frank of forcing integration on a city that wasn't ready for it. Frank ignored all of it. Kept performing. Kept insisting that Sammy and any other black entertainer be treated with respect. The relationship between Frank and Sammy became legendary. They weren't just colleagues. They were genuinely close friends. Frank was the best man at one of Sammy's weddings. Sammy named Frank the godfather of his children. They supported each other through scandals, divorces, career troubles. And whenever someone asked Sammy about the source of their bond, he'd point back to that night in 1959. "That's when I knew Frank was real," Sammy would say. "That's when I knew he saw me as an equal. Not a black entertainer. Not a novelty. But as a man deserving of the same respect he demanded for himself." The integration of Las Vegas hotels didn't solve all of the city's racial problems. Far from it. The West Side remained impoverished and neglected. Police brutality against black residents continued. Economic opportunities remained limited. But it was a crack in the wall. A moment when one person with power used that power for something beyond self-interest. In 1960, just months after the Sands integrated, other major hotels followed. The Flamingo. The Desert Inn. The Tropicana. By 1961, official segregation in Las Vegas hotels was largely over. It had taken one night, one friendship, and one person willing to risk everything to do what was right. Frank Sinatra never talked much about it publicly. When reporters asked him about forcing the Sands to integrate, he'd brush it off. "I didn't force anything. I just said I wouldn't work somewhere that disrespected my friends." That's not heroic. That's basic decency. But to Sammy Davis Jr., it was heroic. It was everything. For the rest of his life, whenever Sammy performed in Las Vegas, he'd tell the story. Sometimes from the stage, sometimes in interviews, sometimes just to friends over dinner. He'd talk about the night he stood in a parking lot with a suitcase, ready to leave the hotel where he'd just been a star, and how Frank Sinatra had said no. "Not here. Not to my friend. Not anymore." Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990 at age 64. Frank Sinatra spoke at his funeral. "Sammy was the greatest entertainer I ever knew," Frank said, his voice breaking. "But more than that, he was a great man who endured indignities that would have broken most people. And he did it with grace and humor and talent that made the world better. I was honored to call him my friend. I was honored to fight for him. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat." The story of that night at the Sands became part of Las Vegas history. Part of civil rights history. Part of the story of how America slowly, painfully began to dismantle the systems of segregation that had defined the country for so long. It's a reminder that change doesn't always come from laws or court decisions or mass movements, though those things matter enormously. Sometimes change comes from individual moments. Individual choices. Individual people saying, "This is wrong and I won't participate in it anymore." Frank Sinatra didn't solve racism. He didn't end segregation. But he did something. He used his power and his platform to protect his friend. To insist on dignity. To draw a line and say, "Not here. Not to someone I care about." And that something rippled forward. It made the next fight easier. It gave other people courage to make their own stands. Today, when you walk into any hotel in Las Vegas, you don't think about who's allowed to stay there. You don't see signs about separate facilities or policies about who can sleep where. That seems normal now. But it wasn't always normal. It took fights. It took sacrifice. It took people like Sammy Davis Jr. enduring humiliation with grace. And it took people like Frank Sinatra saying enough. This ends now. The night Sammy Davis Jr. couldn't sleep at the Sands became the night the Sands changed forever. And in changing one hotel's policy, it changed a city. Changed an industry. Changed countless lives. If this story moved you, subscribe for more untold stories about the moments that made legends truly legendary. Hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of standing up for others. Because sometimes the most important thing we can do is refuse to accept injustice, even when everyone else says, that's just how things are.